Hi guys, welcome back to a new video. So in this video I will teach you how to use arguably one of the most useful services in all of Roblox. So something I see beginners, intermediates, even advanced Roblox scripters struggling with is Roblox Datastores. Now Datastores are one of the few ways to save data in Roblox Studio. So in this video I'm going to try and clear up any confusion and feel free to ask questions in the comments and I'll try to respond as fast as I can. So hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a better understanding of what the Datastore service is and how to use it. So first you have to ask yourselves, what will we need for our Datastore? So for our Datastores we'll need a few things. One, we'll need something to save player data. We'll make up some leader stats, I guess. So two, we will need to save and load the player's data. And lastly, we will need to ensure the data is saved. What I mean by that is that Datastores aren't always 100% consistent. They can fail sometimes, and when they do, we need to compensate for that. We do that via systems like auto-saving and retrying a few times if the save/load fails. So now that we know what we need for our Datastore, we can continue. So let's go over the main functions in Datastore. When you are using the Roblox Datastore service, the two functions that you will be using to save and load your player data are setAsync and getAsync. setAsync will change the value of what the provided Datastore is holding, and getAsync will get the value of what the provided Datastore is holding. If we wrap this in a pcall in case of errors, we basically have our saving and loading system. So as per usual, I have the assets available in the description. It contains the full Datastore script and some buttons that you can press to give you like leader stats and stuff. So for tutorial's sake, I will only take the buttons and just drag those into workspace. So go to your toolbox, take the Datastore for Noobs assets, and that should insert in some stuff here. So if we just look inside, we've got the Datastore script. I'm not going to use that because we're going to do that together, and I'll just put these inside of workspace. If you don't want to follow along and you just want to get this up and running, you can look in the instructions. But I can just delete this now once I've got this all in here. So now we'll just create a new script. I'll just call this Datastores. And now we're ready to go. First thing we're going to want to do is remove this print hello world because we don't really need it. So the first thing we're going to want to do, obviously in our Datastore script, is we're going to want to get the Datastore service. So I'll just call this Datastore service, and this is game get service Datastore service. Now personally I think this is very long and I don't really like it, so I'll just call it DSS, but you can call it Datastore service if it's easier for you to read, but I think it's a lot better as DSS. So now that we have the service, we need to actually, I'm just going to call this Datastores really quickly, sorry. We need to actually get the Datastore. We need to make a variable for that. So we're going to make leader stats store. Now basically what this will do, we need to do DSS get Datastore. Get Datastore, and we're going to call this leader stats store. So what this is doing here is actually, what it's gonna do is it's gonna get the Datastore off the player if they don't already have it, or it's basically gonna get the Datastore if the player already has this Datastore, or it's gonna create one for it if it doesn't already have one. So now we just need two functions. So the load function, which will take the player parameter. I need to put function here. So we need the load parameter. We need to do load, and then we'll take in the player, and then another function which is save, and that will take in the player as well. So basically now we can just start coding in our functions. So the first thing, each Datastore is locked in the player. We need to have a key to unlock it. So our key, it needs to be unique for every player. So I'll just call this player, and we'll concatenate it with their user ID. So this is unique for every player because each player has a different user ID. So now we're gonna just make some quick leader stats. You should already know how to do it. To what the leader stats store contains. So we'll just call this leader stats data. And we don't need to set this to anything just yet, But basically what this is going to be equal to is it's going to be equal to what the leader stat store contains. Then we're going to want to do local loaded. Local loaded is equal to false, and local attempt is equal to 0. Basically, we're going to keep attempting. Basically, we're going to increase this by 1 until loaded is equal to true. So now we're going to do, I'm just making a quick comment here, say load the player's data, the player's leader set data. So now we're just going to make a while loop called while not loaded, and attempt is less than 4 do. So what this is saying is while the data has not been loaded and the attempt is less than 4, so if we haven't done less than 4 attempts, then we'll run this code. So we're going to do a p call here. I'll explain this in a second. So local success error, and we're going to set this equal to p call function. So what this is, basically, this just contains the error. So we're just going to, basically in case the data store errors, we can kind of like back it up with a p call. So in this p call, we're going to set leader stats equal to the leader stats store, and we're going to get async. This is the function we talked about earlier, but basically this is leader stats data. But what this is doing is if we're going to try and get what's inside of the leader stats store, and we need to pass in a key, basically unlock the player's data store. So now what we're going to do is after we've gotten async, the store, we're going to do if it was a success, like if the p call was a success, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to check that leader stats data is not nil. So if leader stats data is existent, then we're going to want to set gems.value equal to leader stats data 1 here, and this will all make sense in a second when we make the save function. But so then we're going to do money.value. So the way since we're in the load function, not the save function, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the way we're going to save leader stats store, we're going to save it as a table, and a table has multiple values, and we're going to store the gems first, and the XP second, and the money third. So it's all going to go in that order, and it's all going to work out once you just see it. So now we're just going to make an else right here. So else, we're going to say print no data for player, because basically if there is no leader stats data, then that means there's no data for the player. So we're just going to giving default data. Basically, leader stats data didn't exist, so no data for player, and we're just going to give them the default data. So leader stats data, and then is equal to a table 0, 0, 0. So because the default is 0 for each of these. So basically, if you want to give them 20 gems by default, put 20 here. If you want to give them 50 XP by default, but I'm just going to give them 0 for now. But you set that to whatever you want. So now, because it was a success, we can just set loaded equal to true. So it's the data successfully loaded. So loaded is equal to true, and we can do key, and then data loaded successfully. I'm just putting prints here so we know what's going on in our code. And I think that's 1. Yeah. So we're basically going to say the player's key data loaded successfully. And then if this isn't a success, therefore it's an error, we can say print keys data failed to load, and then we can print out the error message. So we can say error, and then we can we can concatenate this, I guess, with the error that happened. Yeah, so now that we have that all in order, we can make the save function, and once we make the save function, hopefully all of this, the leader stats table thing, will make sense. So we can go into the save function here, and once more we're going to need to get the key. So let's just scroll up here, grab the key, paste that in there. And then we're going to do, and now this is about to make perfect sense, leader stats data, and you'll see what we're actually setting it to. So we're setting it equal to the player.leaderstats.gems.value. Yeah, I think I called this gems, right? Yeah. And then we're going to do player.leaderstats.xp.value. Then we're going to do player.leaderstats.money.value. So hopefully, I think you might have already noticed, but the order in which this table is gems, XP, money is the order in which we did it. Gems 1, XP 2, money 3. Yeah, gems 1, XP 2, money 3. So hopefully that makes sense now, the way we're saving it. And then we can do our loading method again, but this time for saving. So loaded is equal to false, and local attempt is equal to 0. So basically, oh, and also one last thing, I completely forgot to do this, but if it fails to load, then we're gonna want a plus equal attempt, because we're gonna go over again and try it again if it failed. So make sure that's there. So then now what we're gonna want to do is we're gonna want to save the player's data. So we'll just put a little comment there so we know what we're doing. We're gonna do this loop again while not loaded, and attempt is less than 4. We're gonna do another p call. So basically this save and load are pretty similar. So this is equal to a p call function, and then we're gonna try and, but this time you'll notice we're gonna do set async, and we're gonna pass in the key parameter. So before we did get async, which gets the data, and then set async. So basically up here we get the data, set it equal to leader stats data. So once we got the data, then we're gonna assign it according to the data. We're gonna assign, like, we're gonna use that data and set the player's stuff to that data. So we're just gonna set async, and we're gonna do key, but now we have to add in a second parameter, which is what data we want to set this leader stat to, and what we want to set this data store to, and we're just gonna set it equal to leader stats data. So we're basically setting the leader stats store equal to this, to all of the leader stats that the player has. So now if success, so if it was able to write to our data store successfully, then we're just going to check if leader stats data is not equal to nil. And I'm pretty sure that check you don't really need, but I'm just doing it in case. We're going to want to set, so then we're going to want to do player.leaderstats.gems.value, or really just, we don't need this. Yeah, I think we don't need that, yeah. And then, so now that we can just do if it was a success. So if success, then we can basically set loaded equal to true, and we can print that the we can do keys data saved successfully, and then else, if it isn't a success, if it's an error, then we will print keys data failed to save, and then we will print out the error, and then we will increase tempt by 1. And now we just need to make two functions, two events, game.players.player added. So when the player is added, we're going to get the player that added, and we're just going to call the save function, the load function, and we're just going to pass in the player. And then now we're going to make a player removing function, get the player that's removing, and save their data. So load and save. Now, we are done with the coding, so hopefully this all made sense for the most part. So we're basically using async and set async, and that does all of the work for us in our data store saving. And of course, we added in a few more measures to ensure that our data isn't lost. So that's the loading and saving. Now we only have one last part to do, which is auto-saving. So autosave. Let's just put a little function, a little comment here. So, oh god, while wait 300 do. So every 300 seconds, that's every 5 minutes I believe, we're going to cycle through all of the players in the game. So for every player in game.players get players. And then this underscore means that we don't need I, so we're just gonna put it as an underscore and it'll ignore it. So we're gonna get the key of the player, and that is player, and you always gotta make sure you're consistent with your keys. And then we're gonna do local leader stats data, and then if that's equal to the player.leaderstats.gem gems.value, and then player.leaderstats.xp.value, and then player.leaderstats.money.value, and then local loaded is equal to false local. We're basically copying our other functions just in a while loop, and then we're just gonna autosave the player's data, and we're gonna just basically just copy this save function. So copy this, paste it down here, and now we're good to go pretty much. So before we start and test, one common issue I see people run into all the time is hitting stop on the play button doesn't call the player removing function anymore. Roblox removed that. So your data does not save in Studio. So you have to test it in game or test it in a local server. So yeah, just make sure you don't do that. Okay, so before we start, there are two crucial things. You must have your game published. Must be published. So just call this like Datastores, and you gotta hit create. Just make sure you publish it first. Then once you do that, it will say successfully published. Then you're gonna wanna go to game settings, and you're gonna wanna go to security and enable studio access to API services. See, it even says here, enable studio access to game services such as Datastores. You need this enabled for it to work. And then of course, test it in game, like in the Roblox client itself, not in Studio. It will not work. So if we play the game here, you will see that I load in. I'll click the buttons a little bit here, get some leader stats. You'll see it's giving me stuff. Now if I leave the game, and then it's just going to be black for a moment while I load back in. Play the game, load back in. You'll see my data has saved. I have 60 gems, 50 XP, 70 money. So hopefully it's all working. You'll see on the server we have our prints, player 23792. That's just my user ID. My data loaded successfully. So now, hopefully this worked for you. Obviously, this probably isn't everything that you need for your game, but hopefully this makes sense to you now, and you can watch this video as many times as you need. I strongly suggest that you download the assets and just study the code for a while until you understand what's really going on, and then hopefully you can replicate this to any of your other data store needs for your games. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.